everyone, welcome to the channel. I want to discuss racial ambiguity as a biracial and also having half-white privilege if you are half-white. I briefly mentioned this in one of my videos where I was discussing if you should identify the way the world views you as. And I mentioned half-white privilege because that's something I don't hear too many people talking about online. Of course, mixed race has its own privileges, as we know, because of the racial ambiguity, the proximity to whiteness, whether you're mixed with white or not. But very specifically, biracial people that are half white do have some type of trickling effect of white privilege. And it doesn't mean that you have to be white passing or even look white. Someone can look at you and say, oh yeah, you're not white at all. They had no idea. But at the same time, there is this effect that when people either don't know that you're half white, but you have a racially ambiguous look, or they find out that you're half white, there is a difference in the way that you're treated. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to every single person that is half white. It's something I've noticed as I've traveled the world and just been to different places, met so many different people, been involved with different cultural events, people that aren't black or white. They do treat me differently than they would someone who is maybe more black passing or mostly black, where I'm also mixed with Hispanic, Latina. I have Cuban in me, like Portuguese, Spanish. So I do have a bit of a different look as well. But there are biracial people that go and travel across the world. And if people don't know exactly where they're from, they can kind of get by with certain things, whereas someone that is more black passing or even more white passing or a white person, it's just kind of known what you are. You're black or you're white, and they might assume you're American, or they might assume you're from England or wherever. But when you look like me and you are racially ambiguous, you can pretty much go anywhere in the world and blend in with that culture, unless you completely look separate. Just going to different places, like when I was in Turkey, they thought that I was also Turkish. So this is something that a lot of racially ambiguous people go through, especially if you are mixed race. You tend to have a mixture of different features, so you're going to have a different look. And it doesn't matter if you are more identifying with one side or the other, it's still something that you will benefit from. Now, going on to half-white privilege. The reason why I mention it and call it that, and it's something that my family and I have actually discussed, my white side of the family and me, they have mentioned to me about having that half-white privilege. And it's not saying that, okay, you're white. It's saying that because you are half white, there is that identity that white people can see in themselves, just like black people can see themselves in me as well, even though I'm not the standard of black or white, but I have a combination. So when you can see parts or all of yourself in a person, you tend to relate to them more. And that's just a business strategy as well. That's something just in personal conversations. Like if you're a salesperson, you tend to talk more like the customer or try to relate to the customer so they can buy something from you. People tend to want to buy or connect with someone that they have a connection with. They can see, hey, I see myself in this person somehow, the way that they look, the way that they talk, the way that they act, whatever it is. And that's the same for biracial people. It's a weird situation that we kind of navigate through, but we're also more palatable to the white audience. And that's why in media, a lot of black representation in the United States is through biracial people. Although they're not necessarily white, but they're not all the way black either. And unfortunately, we do live in a society where white supremacy is still a big part of our society and standards. So when they control the media, they want their image out there, and for a little bit of diversity, they might add in someone who is more racially ambiguous, but they don't want to go full on black unless they're putting that situation out there, like they want to be stereotypical or portray black people in a bad light, then they'll do that. And you see it all over media. That's nothing that you can really deny. But being a mixed race biracial person who is more ambiguous, white people tend to have more of a palatable experience with you. They're able to see you as partly someone that they can relate to, rather they say you're white or not. It's not like an obvious, you're white, so I'm going to connect with you. It's a relatability. Like I was mentioning with being a salesperson, trying to sell someone something, you come to some type of similarity, rather it's the way you look, act, whatever, it's a feeling, and people just react that way. That's what I'm talking about when I mention that we're more palatable. Also, having half white privilege is being treated better by white people, but also other ethnicities. And it's not to say that that's always the case and that we can't experience racism, because obviously we know that that's true as well. And I mentioned that in other videos too, where sometimes mixed people that are kind of privileged and they're benefiting from their half white privilege. And I think of Meghan Markle, that's like the best example. And I call that the Meghan Markle effect, where you don't really have to deal with a lot of racism. Of course, there's people that can notice a difference in you, but because you have that more palatable look to white society, they don't treat you the same way they would treat a fully black person that is unambiguously black, that doesn't have any of the racial ambiguity. Like, for example, if you go over to another country, like my husband is Persian, and I went to Turkey, him and I, and we actually went to a Persian wedding for one of his friends there. And all of the people that were there, most of them were Persian, and they all thought that I was Persian, or at least mixed with Persian. They would speak Farsi to me, and of course my husband's telling me, yeah, everyone thinks that you're Persian. I even thought you were when I first met you. You relate to so many different people, even if you're not part of that mixture ethnicity and culture. In Turkey as well, other people that were talking to me or seeing me, they just assumed that I was from there. But when you are not as racial, racially ambiguous, people notice that more. So for example, my best friend, she's unambiguously black. And her experience with going to other countries or just being around other people is slightly different because, for one, people already know that she is black. It's also no secret too that some people of other ethnicities, not black or white, that have a dislike for black people, which of course this is all from white supremacy. It doesn't just affect the United States, although I do think that it's really prevalent here because of the history. A lot of the racial tension here obviously stems from historical events and slavery. White supremacy is not just something that happened here in the United States, but it has happened all over the world. And other cultures have differences with if you have darker skin, but you're the same race, like if you're both Indian, but someone who's a darker Indian versus someone who's a lighter Indian, the lighter Indian gets more attention, gets more love, because that's seen as the fairer you are, the richer you are, the more beautiful you are. And if you're dark, that means that you had to work out in the sun. You don't really have a good family because you had to be out and working hard, versus someone who's fair, they're in the house more. Now, obviously, that's not true. You can sometimes be naturally lighter and you just naturally born darker. It doesn't mean that you were in the sun all the time. These other cultures look at it in that way. It's just the psychological effect that happens because of white supremacy. With you being racially ambiguous, you're more tolerable and palatable to those types of ethnicities as well. And I'm not saying that this is a good thing or a bad thing or anything like that. This is just stating what happens as a mixed person. For me personally, I have always gotten along better with people that were more racially ambiguous or completely not black or white. In the United States, obviously being a biracial person, I did have friends that were black and white and also other biracial people. But because of the differences and some of the nuance that people have here, because of the racial history, I got along better with people that were not from this country, or they just have a different culture altogether. Or I've had Italian friends like that were from Italy. I have a Macedonian friend. I have lots of Arab friends. So I just got along better with people that were not necessarily black or white American. But I also got along, of course, with people that were American. It just was situational. And then that brings me to my point, too, that the privilege is situational. Now, some white people might try to humble mixed race people, and I call this the Meghan Markle effect, where everything is fine until someone who's racist decides to let you know how black you really are and you'll never be white. I mentioned that briefly in my last video as well, where a white guy randomly commented on my video saying that, no, you're not white, when I never said I was white. And then how some black people feel vindicated and saying, see, that's what you get. They humbled you. They just opened your eyes a little bit. Whereas biracial people, for the most part, are not necessarily trying to be white or black. They're trying to exist as both. But historically, because of the one drop rule and the racism that surrounded being any type of other mixes other than just being white. That was to keep people of color to not succeed, keeping them from having lands and having homes. Being racially ambiguous, you had more of a chance to succeed in society, and that's just historical with the United States. But I want to talk about the Meghan Markle effect, or what I like to call that, because when she first got married into the royal family, all of the Black people in the United States were so supportive of her, and they were saying how they were so happy that we finally have a Black princess, and they were all supportive until she decided to not identify as just fully Black. She would just identify as being biracial. And a lot of biracial people code switch unintentionally, and this is just when we're in situations because we do navigate two different worlds, and it's just different for us. It's not something that white or Black people can fully understand, just like we can't fully understand being full white or full Black because we're both. Whereas with Meghan Markle, because she's lighter skinned, she's more racially ambiguous, she was able to navigate her life as someone who didn't really have to worry about race. And let's be real, if she was more unambiguous, or if she was just fully Black, she wouldn't have even had a chance with Harry. And it's not to say that Harry's not attracted to Black women, it's just that is more palatable in those societies. And that's the point that I'm trying to make in this video. It's not about attractiveness or beautiful per se. It's just more about she being more ambiguous. She can fit into different societies. But of course, racist white people being racist white people let her know that she's not fully white when, in my opinion, she wasn't trying to be fully white. She was just existing. And I can relate to that because I don't get treated like a fully Black woman either. Although I have experienced racism or discrimination, but it's not because I was trying to be white and then they checked me or humbled me and said, hey, look, you're not white. It's just that happens when you're biracial. So the Meghan Markle effect is you're great until you don't fully say you're Black. If you say you're mixed or you identify with being more white or having a different culture, whatever, that's not fully Black. That's when I think some of the Black community turns on you. And I understand that to some extent, but then at the same time, I don't, because being biracial, you're kind of forced into choose a side. When in reality, we don't have to choose any side. We can just be who we are. And having that racial ambiguity, sometimes being biracial, you have that code switching unintentionally. You are just trying to exist within different cultures of who you are. But that's why I mention people like Meghan Markle and being married into the royal family, although a lot of people in England, I mean, I see almost every day that people in England are just posting all kinds of things about her and comparing her to Kate. It's just interesting how that works, because a lot of white women are intimidated when it comes to people of color that seemingly are also on the same level as them, or they can compete with them. I also have a video where I talk about that too, how some white women try to humble mixed race and biracial people. And it's not always a racism thing, but because historically white women have always been protected in this country by white men, and whatever laws that were written by white men, it would benefit white women, even if there are rules and regulations with gender roles and things like that. But at the end of the day, the white woman is more protected than the Black woman or any other woman in the world. And when they have those types of competitions, or they're seeing someone who's not fully white in their position, like Meghan Markle, now they want to tear that person down. But if she had just been like Kate, just a normal white woman, even if she acted the exact same way and did the exact same things, they wouldn't have had much to say. They would have found a way to say, oh, but she's still so great and she's so beautiful. Just like they do with Kate. She can do no wrong because she is what they consider the perfect white woman for the royal family. And I'm sure there's people out there that don't even like her because of her social class. Maybe, I don't even know much about her, but I don't think that she was rich or comes from that type of family. I think she was just like a normal woman. And then she met Prince William and became his wife and had children. But with Meghan Markle, she's also American. She's not fully white. All of these different things that are strikes against her. People just have their idea of what they want. I'm also thinking about Ariel and how a lot of white people went crazy when Halle Bailey was playing Ariel. And some of these white people are getting really like jacked up about these characters changing because of diversity, and then they call it woke America and all these different things, like these buzzwords to get people to feel bad about putting other representation in there. And then the representation they do bring are biracial people that look like me to present a black person because they're uncomfortable with fully black people. So that's what half white privilege is for biracial people. Even if we do get some fire and smoke from white people and even some black people, even if a white person tries to quote unquote humble us and say, hey, you're not white, that's not a flex. Like, we're not trying to be white. We're just existing, and because we are getting more recognition with all of these different things, people are starting to have issues. And with Halle Bailey, she's more light-skinned, but still a black woman, that people were upset because she wasn't a white redhead. I even saw some people commenting that were redheads, and they were like, well, this is against me as a redhead because we already don't have that much representation in Hollywood. So even within white communities, they have their own standards of who's not represented. It was all about blonde hair and blue eyes for a while, and now it's more of that brunette, getting that darker color going. And now there's redheads that aren't really represented as much. So they have their own deals that they talk about, and then add in people that are not fully white or that are completely not white at all, there is even more. So their spot is being threatened when it comes to media. Although white still runs the media, but there are a lot of changes that are going on in the world all around, and the beauty standards are also shifting. It may not happen overnight. It might take another 50 or 100 years, but the more that people are accepting of racial mixing and people looking more ambiguous, even people that are fully white, but they're getting surgery to look like they're mixed, because I see that all the time as well. Those types of people, they're becoming more accepted. And being racially ambiguous or having half-white privilege as a biracial is part of that effect. That is part of this experience that we have. But that's all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you want to hear more about half-white privilege and just the privileges in general of being biracial, please let me know down below in the comments, or what kind of situations that you guys might have experienced as a biracial, or even if you're just a lighter-skinned black person that happens to be ambiguous. Please let me know what your experiences are, because I do know that it's different for everyone. It's situational. It's not always going to be that black and white, no pun intended, but it is something that we experience as biracials. Thank you. Until next time.